Danger Zone.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. It's your host, Kev Baker, here for another hour of amazing radio, right here on the Kev Baker Show, on your number one network, truthfrequencyradio.com. And it's number one because of all of you out there. Makes my night every time I log in and I see all of you tuning in night after night. You don't know what that does for me and my co-host, Johnny Whistles. Now, I hope you've enjoyed the past couple of nights, because I didn't really appreciate all the bombshells that our 5 political activist guests had on them. It was utterly mind-blowing. And like I said during those shows, I think people will look back on them as being historic broadcasts. It's not just those shows that will be looked back on in time. I think some of the work we do with tonight's guest, Anthony Patch, as well, they too will be historic in their own way. Tonight as well, we're going to be breaking new ground. It's going to be everywhere. You're going to love tonight. Johnny Whistles, I can't wait to get going, man. You had a bit of a nightmare getting logged into Skype, but let's forget that. And I want you, Johnny, to cast your mind back to 2013, to Bilderberg. Do you remember the first weekend we ever met, John?
Oh, yeah, I can remember that, Kev.
I came up to see you, got a quick cup of coffee, met you physically, one of my contacts on Facebook, just when I was starting out. And I was going down to attend, well, to visit the Bilderberg meeting in Watford. And that was in June 2013. Now, while we were down there, obviously, there was a famous character, or he's famous now. He goes by the name of Edward Snowden. Now, he came out and he broke all of the NSA wiretapping, all that kind of stuff. And I remember being in the field at Bilderberg, and we were talking about all the attendees, all the Wookiee people that would be turning up there, these politicians, these CEOs. And there was this first-time speaker coming as well. And this first-time speaker was called Alex Karp. And he was representing a company at the time I knew nothing about called Palantir. Now, we're going to be getting into this company extensively tonight. But, John, before I go to our guest, do you remember what else happened? Something very, very creepy happened that weekend when I was approached by a police officer. Do you remember that, John?
Yeah, that's right. He told you it was best taking your glasses off. We know you, Kev Baker.
Yeah, that was basic. Yeah, that's a better way of telling it. I'm at Bilderberg. The police are wandering around, randomly come up to me. And if you're a new listener, you probably haven't heard this story. I was with one of our listeners at the time, Nicola Abraham. I was on a different network before I came to TFR. I was doing the YouTube, and this police officer just randomly came up and said, Kev, good YouTube channel, like the videos. Kind of taken aback. And he says, you're kind of recognisable with those sunglasses on. And, I was only looking back in hindsight now that the level of surveillance that we were under that whole weekend, it was off the charts. It really was. For 2013, with technology moving so fast, even then, I was blown away by it. And I just wonder if Palantir had something to do with the software that was running that day. So what am I talking about tonight? Well, I've got Anthony Patch along with us to break some new information. For new listeners, Tony Patch is an author, researcher, and he's got a number of books, including Covert Catastrophe, 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, Revising Reality, and Coalescence still to come. And I'm sure there'll be more books out of Mr. Patch as well. He's got a show on here on a Friday night. I co-host with him, 10 p.m. in the UK, 5 p.m. in the East Coast, 2 p.m. on the West Coast, The Anthony Patch Show. You can check out all of his amazing work where he breaks all the latest news on CERN, physics, quantum computing over at anthonypatch.com. And Tony, you're back with us tonight, brother. And this is kind of a follow-on from last week's show because we were concentrating on a D-Wave presentation that you had found. And towards the end of it, we were both blown away by the fact that they were quite openly talking about cloud-based quantum computing. And at the time, the D-Wave engineer who was making the presentation, who remained faceless throughout, he talked about these companies, or one company in particular, which he didn't name, a Palo Alto company. And Tony, this kind of set us down a rabbit hole, didn't it? Is he there? And there we go, Johnny Whistles, already at the start.
Unbelievable, Kev.
And just to fill the audience in here, myself and Tony have both been experiencing horrendous problems today. I don't usually get this. My email has even been freezing up and things. Much, much, much craziness. And when we start to break down the information that we've got for you, all will be clearer. And, you know, Johnny, you just don't know what to say when this happens, do you? And hopefully we'll be connecting with Mr. Patch. Here he is. He's back with us, and he's away again. I'm going to phone him on the phone, Johnny.
Yeah.
The whole...
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing about this, Kev, is we always seem to get some sort of problem when we get Tony Patch on. As you know, today, logging into my Skype tells me that someone has logged in at another location. So I had to use another email address to verify. And when I went onto the other email address, they made me go through every single thing that I've put on there to try and verify myself. And then at the end, it tell me I need to wait 3 days to see if I've given them enough information.
It's crazy, and hopefully now we have got Mr. Patch with us. Are you there, Tony?
I am. Can you hear me on Skype?
I can hear you, Tony. Are you there?
No, they just cut me off on Skype again.
You're still here. You're still
here.
Somehow we've got two accounts. I'd phoned your other account as well, but you're here, Tony.
You there?
I'm here. Can you hear me? I'm going to use the phone, Johnny. Johnny, quickly run through the chat room. I will get Mr. Patch back on the line.
I'll do that just now, Kev. In there just now, 43 in the tinfoil hat area. Thanks, everyone, again for turning up my numbers. Starting with our two wonderful moderators. We've got Lucky and Star-Lord. We've got our Alan Surgeoner, Armand Adams, Calvin Long, Carol Smith-Rea, Charles Calvo, Chris Smith, Christine Fredericks, new name in there, Dark Horses, Drone Free Zone. We've got Jeff Phillips, iPaddy Mac, love that. We've got iFerian, Mr. James Millward, Joyce Burns.
Well, Johnny, I'm going to cut in there. Cut to save us losing any more time. We've got Anthony Patch on the line right now. You're with us, sir. You're live. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kev. Are we doing all right?
We are doing fine. We knew this would happen, and I was explaining to the audience, Tony, that for once today, I've been experiencing the glitches that you experience. We're going to be talking about this company, Palantir, and I don't know if you heard my setup to you, the fact that we got led down this rabbit hole after last Friday's show when we were watching that D-Wave video. Do you remember?
Yeah, exactly. And the company was not, Palantir was not cited, but it was in the context of the chief scientist from D-Wave explaining that there are only about 5 companies in the United States that were third-party software providers for D-Wave for the implementation of accessing the D-Wave computers through the cloud through these third-party software programs. The point is they mentioned only one by location, and that was Palo Alto. That's where Palantir is. Now, that sounds like a loose connection, but these guys do not mention things without it being scripted and thought about before. The digging that you and I have done since then was precipitated not only by that comment that we cited on Friday's show when we talked about the connection between D-Wave and CERN, but now the D-Wave connection with Palantir. Palantir is a third-party provider to D-Wave, and this came about, this discussion was just before the events that unfolded in Saudi Arabia over the weekend. So these are falling like dominoes. So what happened in Saudi Arabia that got us all fired up, Kev?
Well, I got sent numerous, and I really do mean numerous, emails, Facebook messages asking me what the heck was going on. Because here was Donald Trump stood with his hands on some kind of magical, mysterious, woo-filled ball, Tony. I was blown away. And at the time, I'm thinking, well, what's going on here? Do I dive down this rabbit hole? But Tony, you dragged me into this rabbit hole, and I'm glad you did, because this is huge. Aside from the woo, and I mean there is a lot of woo here, that ball that Donald Trump has got his hands famously on now, it is the logo. It's the kind of badge for this company, Palantir. And they stole that name, Palantir, from Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, because Palantir is the magical sphere that the evil Lord Sauron actually uses. Now, we've all seen the films, and if you haven't, it's a big crystal ball hang. And funnily enough, he uses this to get this. He surveils, he tricks, and he threatens his enemies, Tony, across Middle-earth.
Yeah, we're going to be throwing a lot of that sort of thing out there. We're going to be talking about the philosophy behind this company and behind the founder, Karp, his degree, and we're going to give you really what's the flavor of what we're talking about here. Not just the technology and the nuts and bolts and perhaps a little bit of woo thrown in here. We're going to give you really what are these guys thinking philosophically and psychologically, what are they doing? But I want to throw in a very quick piece of scripture here. This is 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 1. And it says here, "But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. Ye are all the children of light and the children of the day, and we are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore let us not sleep, as do others, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. But let us, who are of the day, be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet the hope of salvation. For God hath not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation from our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. Wherefore comfort yourselves together, and edify one another, even also ye do." This peace and safety is repeated so many times by world leaders over the last year, let's say, but especially over the weekend by Donald Trump. Peace and safety, then sudden destruction come upon them. So that's the stage that's been set this weekend, and this is why we are digging into this so deeply today and on Friday.
And Tony, I think as we've been digging into this, I don't know if you want to lay it out just now, but I think just now would be a good part, because some news has broke just today, and this is about NSA and surveillance and about Trump, and you think this ties into everything we're talking about, don't you?
It really does. What we're talking about is breaking news on Fox regarding another data dump from WikiLeaks and uncovering and revealing the violations in the United States of the constitutional Fourth Amendment, which is an amendment that prohibits unreasonable search and seizure. And this is specifically the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, known as FISC or FISA. What has come out is that there has been an abuse by the court of warrants issued to the NSA and the intelligence communities, and therefore it is exposing what we are talking about here regarding Palantir. Now I'm going to say very quickly, Palantir, why it's important, is signified, as you said, Kev, at the beginning, by their trademark, which is that crystal ball. They were saying in Saudi Arabia that this Palantir program is what is running this anti-terrorism center in Saudi Arabia. But more importantly, this is being carried by the President of the United States to each of the countries that he's visiting, including Germany. He is distributing the fact that we have D-Wave, we have Palantir, we can see all, we can monitor all, and yeah, we've been abusing the power of using the warrants in the FICA court system. But oh well, it's too far along. And we don't care about showing our hand, which they did when they placed their hands on the crystal ball of Palantir.
And you know, Tony, this is almost like a weapon that he's traveling about with. It basically is a weapon, because much like you would go to these meetings and say, look, I've got a nuclear bomb now. That's basically what he's doing. He's saying, I've got the D-Wave, and you described it as being the big dog. And nothing comes close to this, Tony. And I think we should look to the president of China and the way he kind of done a U-turn and stopped dead in his tracks after meeting with Trump over that famous chocolate pudding. I think it was D-Wave that was being discussed over the chocolate pudding that night, Tony.
I would suspect it was a black pudding.
A big black cube pudding. But you know, this Palantir company as well, I found a interesting kind of connection loosely between them and D-Wave, and that's the fact that when they were starting up, Tony, we see a $2 billion funding for their startup coming from a company called In-Q-Tel. Now, In-Q-Tel are basically like a public face of the alphabet agencies, and they too are tied up with D-Wave. Now, I thought it was very, very interesting how here we have the D-Wave crew, the nuts and bolts, the hardware, and Palantir, basically the software arm of it, both funded by the same alphabet agencies who use both companies.
That's correct. And so if you, as the president, are saying, okay, we have the new weapons of warfare. We have the quantum computer. We have the quantum computer producing an absolutely unbreakable form of encrypted communications. And we can read everybody else's RSA-based communications. And we have the software that has already, for years now, been monitoring everything in the world. And that is the software. It's not the only program, but it is the big dog program, if you will, of the sentient world simulation, which is monitoring everyone as a node and given an avatar around the world 24/7. That came out of Purdue in 2006. This is part of the software package that operates the sentient world simulation run by D-Wave for the intelligence communities. My point here is, the big picture point is, this is the indicator that the cyber warfare of World War III is about to begin. That's why he's on this traveling roadshow. He's telling everybody, which we can call allies if we want, but he's about to land in Brussels after visiting the Vatican. He's going to meet with NATO in Brussels, the same time that former President Obama will be at the temple, the throne of Satan, Palmyra, the throne itself, which was moved from Turkey to Berlin, and which he used also in his first election in the Democratic Convention. They had a replica of the throne of Satan. Obama, will be meeting with Merkel in Berlin the same day that Trump will be in Brussels meeting with NATO. This is coming together. And this is not fear-mongering. This is dominoes. Okay? These are all dominoes falling in lockstep, that we see this chain of events coming apart. Yeah, go ahead.
Better time, Tony, for him to set out on his first foreign adventure with this massive global cyber attack that took place. Everyone's mind on the world of cyber, and now the Donald is going about saying, yeah, you see those cyber attacks? Nothing in comparison to what I can do with my D-Wave. But that's just my speculation, Tony.
No, that's not speculation. I'm going to back up a couple of dominoes further. Okay, they call that hack attack WannaCry. Well, that's a very interesting name. But let's look at the two primary software packages that Palantir produces. One is Metropolis. That basically is for business operations, investment, community, stock markets, commodity markets. The other should ring a bell with the audience. It's Gotham. Okay, we've got Metropolis, yeah, Superman, Gotham, Batman. Go beyond that. What was the name of the exercise in New York a couple of weeks ago? Gotham Shield.
The famous Gotham Shield, Tony.
Okay. This is not just coincidence, and this is not conspiracy theory. This is them saying, look, you guys, we're so far along on our agenda, we're not even trying to hide it anymore. In fact, here's the crystal ball of the software program that runs this Threat Anti-Terrorism Center, which when you look at it, obviously is pomp and circumstance, obviously is for show, because the NSA, GCHQ, nobody else shows their threat, anti-terrorism center to the public. That was the Dr. Strangelove moment. Recall the round table with all the people sitting around the table in the Dr. Strangelove movie. That's what that is. That is theater. That is Hollywood. That is psychological manipulation of the masses by saying, you know what, guys? We're not hiding anymore.
And it was total theatre. I was sitting watching parts of it, replays of it. And then all the lights flashing. I think it was all dry ice was coming out at one point as well. And it was all staged, but for a reason, for effect. And, just following on from what Tony was talking about there, this Gotham and Metropolis, the other program, this Alex Karp obviously fancies himself as a bit of a superhero. He even describes his employees and the work they do as being the stuff of the Justice League, Tony. This guy is so far up himself, and he's so connected to another uber globalist that we all need to pay attention to, Peter Thiel.
Absolutely. He's a significant player. He comes from PayPal, but he is a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley in California, and he's invested in a number of companies, but he's one of the principal co-founders of Palantir. Now, let me give you a little of the philosophy. You and I have gathered a whole bunch of information on this company, but we're just going to give people bits and pieces today. So we apologize if we're kind of jumping around because we're still pulling the picture together here. I mean, this is like the newsroom, okay? But their philosophy, as described, is Hobbesian. Hobbes. That's from Thomas Hobbes, who wrote Leviathan, the 17th century philosopher. And he believed that a strong central authority was the only option for maintaining peace. The other relationship is to Jean Piaget, who was a psychologist who espoused the merits of a hierarchy, free, okay? No stratification, no top of the pyramid. Hierarchy-free play for children. This is their philosophy. This is one world government. This is the state dominating people. This is them trying to say that the only option for peace is a strong central authority. This is what they believe in at Palantir. This is why this is like saying peace through war. That's what it means. They believe the only way to achieve peace is by killing everybody.
Tony, you've nailed it there, and we're almost on the break already. But, it literally is this new world order. They see themselves in the kind of guise of Sauron. They're going to be surveilling, tricking, and threatening their enemies across the world. And by enemies, I mean all of us. Now, we're going to be coming back after the break, getting into more of this. But like Tony says, you're getting a kind of live view into how the emails and the quantum connections work between myself and Tony. And we're going to bring Johnny into this as well after the break, because Johnny, you've been digging up some stuff about Trump and his trip to the Vatican, this world tour that he's on right now, selling the D-Wave idea. And it's going to get uber creepy after the break when Johnny presents the photographs of his trip to the Vatican. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
We are back. We are live. I am Kev Baker, and this is the Kev Baker Show. We're moving rapidly into part 2 here tonight. Anyone who's just joined us, we are joined by Mr. Anthony Patch. I've got my co-host, Mr. Johnny Whistles, as well. And we're getting into a company called Palantir. And remember that name, note it down, because they are going to be uber important for research purposes and the world that we're living in now. And Johnny Whistles, I'm coming to you now, my brother. Not too technical for you tonight. I hope the brain's nice and fresh tonight, Johnny. But just before the show, I shared with you and Tony a story about how Donald Trump, Ivanka, and Melania had visited the Vatican City today. Something very strange about all of it, though, Whistles, wouldn't you think?
Well, Kev, these pictures, but I'm just posting the first one in the chat here. I mean, to be at the Vatican, dressed in black, that's quite a creepy thing. Do you know what I mean? That we're seeing here, because you posted the other one, Kev. Why would you wear black and black veils at the Vatican?
That's a very good question. And before I get Tony to answer that, I'm going to describe for the listeners out there who are not over at the chat room, truthfrequencyradio.com/chat. Lots of listeners on iHeart, TalkStream Live, so many places. But today, when Donald Trump visited the Vatican, Melania and Ivanka chose to wear all black, with black veils as well. Now, Melania, she's covering her hair in this photograph, yet compare that to when she went to Saudi Arabia and there was such a fuss over nothing when she had no headscarf on. And Tony, when I showed you these images, they struck you as hard as it struck me, right between the eyes. There's something going on here, and I want you to explain to our brilliant audience the significance of visiting the Pope dressed in black.
Well, I will do that, but I think Johnny had some comments that he wanted to make about these photographs as well. So, I want to give him the floor.
Oh, no, I mean, what I was thinking, Tony, was they won't actually be meeting the Pope. It doesn't look at it's meeting the Pope. That looks like you're meeting the Black Pope. That's what I got from it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. For those that don't know, there is a white Pope that we see in the picture, of course. He's always out in the media. Behind the scenes is the Black Pope, who is the Jesuit general. He runs the Jesuit arm of the Vatican, of the Catholic Church. Trump himself is a Jesuit. He is following the directives of both popes. The white Pope is the public image. The Black Pope works behind the scenes. I believe that the reason they're wearing black is in honor of the Black Pope, because the Jesuit agenda has always been afoot, but that's what's behind this. This is what is pushing us towards September, towards the re-reformation of the Protestant and Catholic churches, of the bringing together, in fact, of more than just the Protestant churches, but all religions under the Pope. The strong arm of the Vatican is the Jesuit arm, and that's why I believe they're wearing the black. Now, there could be other reasons that they'll put out in public in a press release and say why, but always you got to look deeper. And just to make a scientific connection, remember, I have said all along, the leadership, public information, the leadership at CERN are all Jesuits, and the Jesuit Black Pope runs CERN. So everything at the top of the pyramid, if you want, is the Vatican itself. So what you're seeing is the New World Order mechanism, software, computer system is pulled together now. The religions are about to be pulled together in September, following in August the eclipse across the United States in the shape of an egg, which is the Ogdoad. Okay, those are the deities they worship. This all goes to the worship of Saturn and the sun. This is all about Apollo. If you look in Trump's Trump Tower condominium, he has a statue to Apollo in there. So this is all about worship of the sun and worship of the moon. This is totally nefarious and occult. This is not conspiracy theory. This is doing research. There's a vast difference.
Absolutely. And, you know, when you talk about this coming together of the religions and thing, Tony, I mean, if we look at this Pope's track record, I mean, he has diluted Catholicism to a point now where it's nearly irrecognizable. And I'm no big fan of the Vatican or the Catholic Church or anything like that. But the point I'm making is, with them welcoming aliens, more homosexuals in the church, stuff like that, he's basically rewriting the rules, and he's diluting that version of the faith, is he not?
Well, he's actually showing their true agenda, their true belief system. Again, they're so far along, they don't care about hiding any of this. This has been in the Catholic Church, in the Catholic religion, for as long as the Catholic organization has been around.
Absolutely. Now, I want to get back into this Palantir mob, Tony, because I know you've done a lot of research. I can't even count the amount of links that you have given me here. But what else do you want to kind of tell the audience about this company tonight, or the D-Wave, the Sentient World Simulation, as a kind of preparation for our show on Friday?
Yeah, Friday we'll get into a lot more of the details as to how this operates and much more information on. We're going to focus Friday on the NSA, and it's funny because you and I were prepping for the show. My computer remotely was shut down 4 times. Every time I try to bring up a specific article on the NSA, my computer would be shut off. This is, by the hand of God, the honest, sworn truth to you as the audience. 4 times in the space of an hour. And this is nothing new. This happens. But when we get into these kinds of sensitive topics, the AI triggers on these words and triggers on the searching. That's what we're going to show you is the software, the multiples by name, the multiples of software programs that are used by the intelligence community to do all the things that we have been hyping and screaming and yelling about in the truth community about surveillance. And that's what Fox is talking about today. Yeah, it's mainstream media, but they're talking about this foreign intelligence surveillance court abuse, the abuse of the warrants. The timing is there. What I want to get into here very quickly is to go back to sort of my default discussion, and that's always psychological operations. Those are done for programming the masses. It's done for deep machine learning to teach through algorithms the AI system about people and to predict people's behavior, thus to control. If you can predict, you can control. That's what this is all about. Now, the founder of this company, he holds a PhD in social theory. Okay? Social theory. We're not talking about a guy who has a PhD in computer programming or computer science or even computer hardware. Okay, we are talking about a guy who, at Palantir, Mr. Carp, that's a fish, by the way. It's a bottom feeder. It eats garbage. That's spelled C-A-R-P, by the way. But Mr. Carp, spelled K-A-R-P, holding a PhD in social theory, goes right back to what we've talked about so much about how deep machine learning takes place in the world of the sentient world simulation, and what D-Wave started with in its benchmarks for its early prototype computers was building algorithms based upon the observations of the behavior, the processes, the communications conducted by human beings.
This guy has a PhD in how we think and behave. So obviously he's going to run a company that builds software based on those algorithms I just described. This is all about psychological manipulation, thus control.
And I think when he started out, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but PayPal, Peter Thiel's brainchild, they were having a problem, a lot of cyber fraud going on. And they were basically using algorithms to try and root out real humans from attacks and stuff like this. And this is where this Alex Karp came in. And when they built this kind of security model for PayPal, that's when they basically realized the value of what they had. And that's when they started kind of going to these alphabet agencies who have so much vast data. It's unbelievable. And one example I came across today that Palantir really made their name in the world of the intelligence community was when a young agent was gunned down by the Mexican drug cartels. Now, they were trying frantically to piece together what had happened. And it would have taken humans probably about 6 months to go through all of the information that the various agencies had all compiled, all independent of one another. Hard to connect everything. That's where Palantir comes into its own, because it can see patterns that the human eye will never pick up on, but it can. And in 3 days, just 3 days, it helped agents track down numerous members of that one cartel. And I believe they caught everyone involved in that whole operation, Tony, in a matter of days. And this is why it became such a hot property, so popular with everyone in Washington. Because they don't even look at other companies now, Tony, do they? Palantir is the place to go.
Yeah, they proved their worth with the U.S. Army and then moved right into all of the intelligence communities. But just to put a label on it, we'll just call it NSA, because that's what we're going to really reveal on Friday, as I said, those programs. But you're exactly right. Again, going back to the prototypes for D-Wave, built upon those algorithms, but the algorithms were for the purpose of pattern recognition, whether it's for images, graphics, pattern recognition, facial recognition, but it was also data patterns. And this goes back to what we talked about on Friday with the new Boltzmann machine, D-Wave computer. The new generation, the new paradigm at D-Wave is moving away from specific problems called optimization, a very narrow focus, to what is now called sampling. And that is done for the purpose of not tossing out what could be considered less than perfect answers or decoherence or errors. They're going to keep all the returns, all of the samples, and then do what are called stochastic. You do this in stock market charting and forecasting. Stochastic theory is pattern recognition and predictive analysis. This is what D-Wave cut its teeth on, is with this Boltzmann machine now, they can sample and in the data see the patterns. Everything is data. The new money, the new currency of the world is data. And if you can recognize the patterns, and I won't go down this rabbit hole, but the geometry, the actual geometric shapes of the data in the samples shows you the patterns and shows you the prediction of the future, and it shows you how to control events, thus control people. Take it away.
And that's what it's all about. It's all about control. And I was watching a video today by Mel and Aaron Dykes. Now, this was back, I think it was 2014, but they were talking about Palantir, and they were showing a slide. It's one of the slides that Alex Karp basically uses to demonstrate all the information that they're taking in. And it showed you how they track individual people, companies, countries, trends. They are monitoring everything. They are taking data and they are able, at the touch of a button, to extrapolate any amount of information that you want and present it in a manner that is very, very comprehensible and very user-friendly. as opposed to all of this vast amounts of ones and zeros and data that's flying about on NSA servers. One press of a button, and I was sharing with you, Tony, when I was looking at some of the diagrams that was on their own website, it was really hitting me between the eyes, because it was like looking at the Samaritan or the good AI machine out of that TV show that people are sick of hearing me talking about, Persons of Interest. And it was whether J.J. Abrahams got to look at this company, and I'm sure he probably had the possibility when he was researching this show, Palantir would have been the place to go, big data. He's copied it, Tony, or he's hiding it in plain sight.
Yeah, they're hiding it in plain sight. And, you know, it's kind of like in the Industrial Revolution when you saw the assembly line process. People became drones on the assembly line. And then you bring in the world of robots and you push the people off the assembly line. It's very much the same thing with the data analyst. And I'm speaking to the data analyst. I'm speaking to the intelligence community right now. You guys will be replaced by the AI. Okay, so you better get on board with Jesus Christ, number one. But you better get on board with us that are shedding light on what's going on here. There's no way we're going to stop what's going on. Kev, that's not the issue, and we're not threatening anybody. We're just saying that individually, people need to understand the threat to our sovereignty as individuals and the sovereignty of the United States.
You know, much like you get the Fox and CNN presenters, they're commentators on politics and all the things going on in the world. Myself, Tony, and Johnny here, we're basically becoming the commentators on what is coming out of quantum computing, artificial intelligence. And I can tell you kind of loosely that there's confirmations coming from people in the know that we really are on the cutting edge of all of this science. I can't believe how lucky. Me as a listener, it's one thing having my own show here, Tony, but I take all this information in as a listener as well. And I'm not just saying this for effect. People are not going to get this anywhere else. But it comes with a kind of word of caution. And I want people to think back to somebody called Danny Castellaro. And he was investigating something that he loosely called the octopus. Now, I'm not saying this to create fear or hype or anything like that. Just to give some historics on what happens when you go digging into the software that these elites, the cabal, are using, this New World Order. And it was Promise software. That was the name of the software that Danny went looking into. I'd love to get Danny on the show to tell us all about that, but unfortunately, Danny Castellaro is no longer with us. Now, you can look into all of that, and I advise you to. And Tony, I don't say that A, for hype, and B, to frighten you or anything, but this is the information that we are breaking right now. It's the modern day Promise software, right?
It very much is. And I think that we are becoming those commentators. As I said last Friday, our audience knows more about quantum computers, more about sentient world simulation and surveillance, knows more about CERN and particle physics, and knows more about DNA modification than practically anybody in the world outside the, rarefied world of the scientific community itself, especially in the layperson population of the planet. Our audience is better informed, and I'm going to say it's because of the efforts of Johnny, you, and me, and others on TFR that we've done that. Yeah, that's blowing our own horn and all that stuff or whatever. I'm just saying, if people want the leading edge of what's going on and they want the commentary, they want our perspective on it because we do the research, then please tell other people about our shows so that the message can get out there. That's all we're saying. Spread the information because, we are a small group here, but this audience, this group is intelligent enough to pay attention and do their own research. All we're giving you today are the nuggets. All we're giving you is the starting point for your own critical thinking, your own research, and then spread it around to other people.
Absolutely. Sorry to cut you off there, Tony, but one of my good friends from Facebook, Michael, in the chat room, and he's got a question. And we've touched on this before, but it does apply to tonight because we've been talking about control, Tony, and that is the name of the game. They want to control us. A lot of talk about microchipping the population. Now, I know we've covered this before. Maybe Michael hasn't heard it, but he's asking, do you think that microchipping is around the corner?
It won't be in the form of a microchip. It will be nanoparticles that are within every person at this point because we've ingested it and inhaled it, taken it in from the environment. These are dormant nanoparticles that will be triggered by the 5G Wi-Fi system. And at that point, that is the mark of the beast. It will manifest on the body, on the hand and on the forehead, but that will be a result of the triggering of those changes to your DNA. This is a DNA modification that will include modification of the mind itself to produce a surf class of drones. Now, I want to mention something just tangential to that. The article came out today. I'll send it to you, Kev. 5G can penetrate the walls just like an X-ray machine and can produce a 3D image of you inside your building through 5G Wi-Fi. Okay, we've kind of known about that, but there's an actual mainstream media article that came out today saying they can look through the walls with 5G. And we talked a lot about 5G, but that's just a tangent to that, and I wanted to toss it in there.
Well, that makes more sense then from the article that I was reading from one of the kind of technical boffins from the telecommunications industry. Remiss of me, I can't remember his name, but he was kind of laughing at the fact that Theresa May and the British government are so determined to roll out 5G nationally by the end of the year. They're going to be selling off all the frequencies very, very soon indeed. Be interesting to see who buys them up. But, you know, he was pointing out the fact that right now, even the 4G, it's perfectly fine. There's not too much demand. People are getting what they want. And why we need 5G in rural areas is beyond him. His words, not mine. But when you start to learn about 5G and what it's really capable of, well, communications, it's probably just a nice little byproduct of what the technology, Tony.
Yeah, and just very quickly about 5G, it has a very short range, which means there have to be antennas everywhere. That's why they're talking about Internet of Everything, your refrigerator, your toaster, everything being connected to the Internet. What they're talking about is placing antennas in your home in the form of your appliances and whatever else, including the smart meter that obviously we've known about for a long time. But it's a short range, but it has a tough time penetrating the walls. So this article saying they can use 5G to penetrate the walls is a demonstration of, let's call it the wattage. This is the power that they are transmitting from a very close by receiving and transmitting site to that wall to be able to penetrate it.
And now, I'm going to be getting into 5G even further next week, Tony, because we're going to be joined by Jimmy Jeans. Now, he's worked with some of this equipment firsthand, and it's going to be really riveting to get his take on that side of things and fit it in to all the research that we're doing. But I want people to think about that, all these smart devices, Internet of Things. It's incomprehensible, the amount of data that even comes out of one house, let alone factoring in a full city and a country. But remember what I said. Remember what Palantir can do? It can go through all of that information in a matter of days, if need be, and pick out patterns and relevant information that the user's looking for at the touch of a button. It is absolutely amazing, Tony.
So we will explain how D-Wave's new generation of computer does that sampling, does that pattern recognition from a software perspective. And I'll give you the quantum physics. And I'm going to tell you this real quick. We got 2 minutes. D-Wave's a quantum computer. So is the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. I've never said that to you before on the air. CERN is a quantum computer. The main ring, the physics, the nuts and bolts of it, I'll show you on Friday. And the planets in the solar system are also a quantum computer. And I will show you Friday, from the physics standpoint, how all of those statements are absolutely valid. we now have massive quantum computing in our environment.
Oh, wow. I just love it when you just drop bombshells, even not on the audience, but on me and Johnny as well, Tony. And, we've got about a minute or so left before I go, and I want to thank you for continuing to come on here on your own show, Tony, and breaking all this news. Myself and Johnny are by your side all the way. And I love my TV shows, Tony, right? I love them. I'm going to post a picture in the chat room for the listeners right now. I'm going to drop it in our chat room for you as well, Tony. I want you to look at this, and it's going to absolutely amaze you, because I like the TV show 12 Monkeys. Now, 12 Monkeys is about time travel, and what they use to do time travel is the Brookhaven Collider in the future. Well, now, and I'm just looking for it here. There it is. I've got it. I'm going to drop it in your chat as well. They were opening a portal to travel through time the other night. They were stood on a red circular kind of stage, and around it, and I just burst out laughing when I seen this. Now, I wouldn't have recognised this a while ago, but because of what Tony has been covering lately, we're looking at a Nokian alphabet in your face at the sight of a particle collider in a fictional TV show about time travel that are opening portals to the past and future. They hide it all in plain sight. And I hope that's whetted your appetite for Friday. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with Mr. Patch on Friday in the UK, 2 p.m. on the West Coast. Please be there. And until tomorrow night, myself, Johnny, and Joe Joseph doing a stand-up wherever you are. Make it TFR.
And didn't touch that dial.
I love that whistler, which he didn't name. A Palo Alto company. And Tony, this kind of set us down a rabbit hole, didn't it? Is he there? And there we go, Johnny Whistles, already at the start.
Unbelievable, Kev.
And just to fill the audience in here, myself and Tony have both been experiencing horrendous problems today. I don't usually get this. My email has even been freezing up and things. Much, much, much craziness. And when we start to break down the information that we've got for you, all will be clearer. And, Johnny, you just don't know what to say when this happens, do you? And hopefully we'll be connecting with Mr. Patch. Here he is. He's back with us, and he's away again. I'm going to phone him on the phone, Johnny.
Yeah.
The whole...
Yeah, the thing about this, Kev, is we always seem to get some sort of problem when we get Tony Patch on. As you know, today, logging into my Skype tells me that someone has logged in at another location. So I had to use another email address to verify. And when I went onto the other email address, they made me go through every single thing that I've put on there to try and verify myself. And then at the end, it tell me I need to wait 3 days to see if I've given them enough information.
It's crazy, and hopefully now we have got Mr. Patch for coffee. Met you physically, one of my contacts on Facebook, just when I was starting out, and I was going down to to visit the Bilderberg meeting in Watford, and that was in June 2013. Now, while we were down there, obviously there was a famous character, or he's famous now. He goes by the name of Edward Snowden. Now, he came out and he broke all of the NSA wiretapping, all that kind of stuff. And I remember being in the field at Bilderberg, and we were talking about all the attendees, all the Wookiee people that would be turning up there, these politicians, these CEOs. And there was this first-time speaker coming as well. And this first-time speaker was called Alex Karp. And he was representing a company at the time I knew nothing about called Palantir. Now, we're going to be getting into this company extensively tonight. But, John, before I go to our guest, do you remember what else happened? Something very, very creepy happened that weekend when I was approached by a police officer. Do you remember that, John? Yeah,
that's right. He told you it was best taking your glasses off. We know you, Kev Baker.
Yeah, that was basically... Yeah, that's a better way of telling it. I'm at Bilderberg. The police are wandering around, randomly come up to me. And if you're a new listener, you probably haven't heard this story. I was with one of our listeners at the time, Nicola Abraham. I was on a different network before I came to TFR. I was doing the YouTube, and this police officer just randomly came up and said, Kev, good YouTube channel, like the videos.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. It's your host, Kev Baker, here for another hour of amazing radio, right here on the Kev Baker Show, on your number one network, truthfrequencyradio.com. And it's number one because of all of you out there. Makes my night every time I log in and I see all of you tuning in night after night. You don't know what that does for me and my co-host, Johnny Whistles. Now, I hope you've enjoyed the past couple of nights, because I didn't really appreciate all the bombshells that our 5 political activist guests had on them. It was utterly mind-blowing. And like I said during those shows, I think people will look back on them as being historic broadcasts. It's not just those shows that will be looked back on in time. I think some of the work we do with tonight's guest, Anthony Patch, as well, they too will be historic in their own way. Tonight as well, we're going to be breaking new ground. It's going to be everywhere. You're going to love tonight. Johnny Whistles, I can't wait to get going, man. You had a bit of a nightmare getting logged into Skype, but let's forget that. And I want you, Johnny, to cast your mind back to 2013, to Bilderberg. Do you remember the first weekend we ever met, John?
Oh, yeah, I can remember that, Kev.
I came up to see you, got a quick cup, kind of taken aback, and he says, you're kind of recognisable with those sunglasses on. And, I was only looking back in hindsight now that the level of surveillance that we were under that whole weekend, it was off the charts. It really was. For 2013, with technology moving so fast, even then, I was blown away by it. And I just wonder if Palantir had something to do with the software that was running that day. So what am I talking about tonight? Well, I've got Anthony Patch along with us to break some new information. For new listeners, Tony Patch is an author, researcher, and he's got a number of books, including Covert Catastrophe, 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, Revising Reality, and Coalescence still to come. And I'm sure there'll be more books out of Mr. Patch as well. He's got a show on here on a Friday night. I co-host with him, 10 p.m. in the UK, 5 p.m. in the East Coast, 2 p.m. on the West Coast, The Anthony Patch Show. You can check out all of his amazing work where he breaks all the latest news on CERN, physics, quantum computing over at anthonypatch.com. And Tony, you're back with us tonight, brother. And this is kind of a follow-on from last week's show, because we were concentrating on a D-Wave presentation that you had found. And towards the end of it, we were both blown away by the fact that they were quite openly talking about cloud-based quantum computing. And at the time, the D-Wave engineer who was making the presentation, who remained faceless throughout, he talked about these companies, or one company in particular. Are you there, Tony?
I am. Can you hear me on Skype?
I can hear you, Tony. Are you there?
No, they just cut me off on Skype again.
You're still here. You're still
you're
here.
here.
Somehow we've got 2 accounts. I'd phoned your other account as well, but you're here,
Are
Tony.
you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me? I'm going to use the phone, Johnny. I'm going to use the phone. Johnny, quickly run through the chat room. I will get Mr. Patch back on the line.
I'll do that just now, Kev. In there just now, 43 in the tinfoil hat area. Thanks, everyone, again for turning up my numbers. Starting with our 2 wonderful moderators. We've got Lucky and Star-Lord. We've got our Alan Surgeoner, Armand Adams, Calvin Long, Carol Smith-Rea, Charles Calvo, Chris Smith, Christine Fredericks, new name in there, Dark Horses, Drone Free Zone. We've got Jeff Phillips, iPaddy Mac, love that. We've got iTherian, Mr. James Millward, Joyce Burns.
Well, Johnny, I'm going to cut in there. I'm going to cut to save us losing any more time. We've got Anthony Patch on the line right now. You're with us, sir. You're live. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kev. Are we doing all right?
We are doing fine. We knew this would happen. And I was explaining to the audience, Tony, that for once today, I've been experiencing the glitches that you experience. We're going to be talking about this company, Palantir. And I don't know if you heard my setup to you, the fact that we got led down this rabbit hole after last Friday's show when we were watching that D-Wave video. Do you remember?